So we are on with Aidan, co-founder and CEO of ChainSafe, and is also a certified Scrum Master, which I certainly appreciate. Would like to go deeper into it a little bit as well. But anyways, welcome. If there's anything you want to say as well, go right ahead.
Well, just thank you so much for having me today, Reza. It's such a pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to really getting into, why we do what we do and really what we're looking to accomplish as an industry.
Great, great. So let's get started just to contextualize the conversation with, your story. How did you end up, in blockchain first of all, and where did you go to university? Or you mentioned that you didn't go to universities, which I'm very interested in knowing more as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey began. I was at university at Laurier in Waterloo, and a lot of my friends were here in Toronto. And I really got introduced through them, through a lot of my friends at the University of Toronto, um, into just decentralized technologies in general. At the time, Bitcoin was the major blockchain. Obviously, there were others. Um, but really, it was about mesh nets. It was about so much more than just blockchain. And really, once Ethereum started to become a part of the conversation at meetups and through our friend group, that's when I think my focus completely changed from being interested in a lot of different decentralized technologies to really being interested in blockchain as a core primitive of what the future web will really be underpinned by. Um,
Interesting. So I really do want to, explore the potential that blockchain technology has, and specifically in the context of your work. So maybe just to preface that whole conversation, we can talk about what the vision of ChainSafe is, what you guys intend to do. I read a little bit about it where you were talking about a web 3.0, right? And the building the infrastructure and building applications that would allow for blockchain agnostic tools, right? And platforms. So can you dive a little deeper into that?
Absolutely. So, just really simply put, at ChainSafe, our mission is to build the infrastructure for Web3. And to maybe unpack that a little bit, what we mean by that is that as we're enabling a new web, we really need to start rethinking the way things are structured. And so no longer is there this notion of a server client architecture where, there's this server that all of us as users are just getting what we need from when we need it. Rather, we're democratizing the access to that information so that we can get the data we need from wherever we need to get it from. And so that's really this massive paradigm shift that we're having with kind of this movement towards Web3. And what we are at ChainSafe is a group of over 50 people where we build core infrastructure to realize that vision. And what we mean by infrastructure is a lot of blockchains. So we build alternative implementations, which are implementations of these core protocols in different languages and that have different, things that can be used for that certain languages will lend them to. So, for example, some might be in TypeScript, which allows for in-browser and mobile friendliness. Others might be in a more systems oriented language like Rust. So what we really do is bring these alternative implementations to the world. They're open source, so anyone can use them. And we try to empower users and developers to be able to do whatever they want with our technologies and however they want to do it. Outside of those core implementations of blockchains, we also build out an interoperability solution to connect these different blockchains. So if you think about the way that the internet works today, you can have servers in different cloud providers and still able to communicate with one another. Similarly, in the blockchain space, when you have a specific blockchain, it needs a way to be able to communicate with another blockchain so that we can, combine the value of both in terms of what they're good at and best at. And so ChainBridge is what allows us to do exactly that and interoperate data, arbitrary messages across these different blockchains. We also maintain other JavaScript libraries and a whole bunch of other code that I definitely recommend to check out at github.com/ChainSafe if you're really interested to see all the different things we're doing.
So, I mean, all of this is obviously a lot of lingo that, you guys use in the blockchain space. And I really want to kind of unpack the whole notion of what Web 3.0 is to begin with, and how is it different from, let's say, Web 2? Is what we use currently called Web 2.0 then? Yeah. Okay. So then what's
Yeah, absolutely.
Web
So
2.0?
for sure. So I think the big difference that we have to remember is that when you're deploying a smart contract onto the Ethereum blockchain, anyone can interact with it. I mean, obviously there needs to be a way in which you can interact with it, right? You can just deploy anything. It doesn't have to allow you to do anything. But for example, if I deploy a tic-tac-toe game, right, onto the Ethereum blockchain, you can interact with it, I can interact with it. Obviously, I have to create permissions or deploy it in a way in which that can happen. But generally speaking, anyone can interact with it themselves by just interfacing directly with the smart contract. That is really a simple way of understanding the ability here and the scope of what we're talking about. When looking at a tic-tac-toe game that you would just go and look up on Google, you're hitting a specific server that if it goes down, you can no longer play tic-tac-toe. So let's take it a step forward. You've now played tic-tac-toe on this specific website for years. You have an incredible amount of reputation and points that let you buy different colors that you could, use to make it a more personal experience. And the game goes down. It's no longer possible for you to do anything with any of that reputation and data you've basically given and worked on to make that tic-tac-toe game something fun for you. Now, in a smart contract version of that, it can never be taken away if it's built in a way that is trustless in terms of anyone being able to have their own game going on within the logic of that smart contract. And so that's the implication here. Obviously, we can take that a step forward and talk about what happens when an Uber driver no longer has the rates that they're used to, but they're trapped to that platform and can't move to Lyft because they don't get to take their reputation with them to Lyft, right? We're talking about real core problems being solved here, where no longer are we restricted to the platforms in which we're playing or using, and instead we're able to take that and be the person who controls our own data. And so that's the real implication of what we're talking about here, right? Now, maybe it's a little bit more understandable with a tic-tac-toe game, but the implications are way greater than just that.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure that there's a lot more use cases to this, which we still haven't explored. But let's say, just based on the example that you gave, if I want to log into a specific application or a specific platform right now, I can use my Facebook or Google account to log in without having to, create or recreate a totally new account in that new system that I'm, let's say, logged in on.
For
So
sure.
is that something similar to the example that you just gave, basically democratizing access to information and usage of systems? Is this what this is really about?
So let's play on your example right now, right? Let's take that to a next level. Maybe Google isn't seeing what, or Facebook isn't seeing exactly what you're doing when you log in, but they know you logged in and they know when you logged in. and they own that data of when and where you logged in.
Right.
Not only that, if they want to stop you from logging in, they can. They can decide, no longer am I authenticating this website. Now, what do we have in the blockchain space? In the blockchain space, we have wallets, where we have a similar model of being able to log in with a public and private key. And what we're able to then do is, if any one wallet provider, which allows you to log into a DApp, a decentralized application, they stop effectively working or they go out of business, you can take the authentication or what is being authenticated, so your private key or mnemonic, which is a representation of your username and password in a set of words, and you can now go and upload that to any wallet provider and still log in without ever having to worry on any one platform, and instead relying on cryptography. And so it's important that we don't just give our private key and our mnemonic phrase to any wallet. Make sure that you're using a trusted wallet, one that is, maybe you're seeing the name of it from a website like ETHHub. Check out ETHHub if you're looking for different types of wallets and ones that you can trust, that are vetted by the community, that are open source, that are verifiably secure and safe. But that's what we're talking about here. We're not just talking about being able to log in anywhere you want, but we're also talking about being able to take what's helping you log in and apply that to any provider, right? So imagine if you could interchange, your Facebook auth, your Google auth, your GitHub auth, and it all comes back to one place, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you see any risks or downsides that aren't currently being measures aren't necessarily being taken action against, so that we don't fall into those pitholes at the moment? Do you see any areas like that in this new space?
I mean, there's lots of issues with any new technology, but where I think there's a lot of opportunities is in better user experiences. And so, ensuring that people have basically access to their underlying primitive of their username and password, or our version of a username and password, without having to worry about losing it, right? If you lose your Facebook and Google auth, you have backup mechanisms built into it. And now we're starting to have these types of things in the space using really elegant cryptographic schemes. And so those exist right now, but we definitely have a need for better user experiences when dealing with usernames and passwords, or our equivalent of usernames and passwords.
Right. And this might be a primitive question here, just trying to create some analogies with respect to what happened, let's say in the early 2000s with the uprise of the internet, right? So right now the blockchain technology is kind of like what the internet was back in the 2000s, right? Now within that space, what will be a good comparison to what ChainSafe is doing at the moment? Is it something like, let's say, an internet? You're not an internet provider. You're a blockchain development company. So you're creating tools where other people are able to do work on your platforms or use your platform to implement things in their own organizations. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to think about us is an extension of the open source movement,
Okay.
right? What we build is open source tools that people use to do what they need to do to build out their dreams. And we do that by building resiliency and decentralization to protocols, by contributing alternative implementations and more developer tooling to these systems. And so really what we are is just an extension of the open source kind of movement that's been happening over the last 10, 20 years. extended into the blockchain space. Because really what blockchain is an extension of two communities that have come together and had an incredible time being around one another. And it's peer-to-peer technologies, right? P2P, you might see that in places, and open source technologies, right? We're open source peer-to-peer tech. And we call it blockchain because of just the way that we structure these things. But at the end of the day, those are kind of the movements that we are working kind of from.
That is a very interesting breakdown. Can you briefly dive into what P2P and open source are for those who are also listening?
For sure. So open source is this concept of verifiably secure code. So it really started as this movement of basically attempting to create a way in which users and actors on the web cannot be taken advantage of. And the only way for them to not be taken advantage of in kind of this, like notionally, with this kind of overarching vision for how the internet should be, is by having everything be verifiable that we're using, right? So for example, we're using Zoom right now for this. There is an open source version of this called Jitsi. And Jitsi, it uses also a primitive, a peer-to-peer primitive that allows you to basically open up a connection to each other. And so think about it like this. You and I are probably a lot closer than all of the servers. So peer-to-peer technologies allow for us to open up connections with one another and through others in a way that is more efficient at times and just more direct without needing as many hops, depending on geographical kind of distance. But it's also just a way of thinking about how we want things like our future kind of digital world to be constructed, right? It's this notion of not necessarily wanting to have our internet controlled by just a small group of people, right? In Canada, we have tremendous issues with the lack of kind of diverse internet providers, right? And so imagine if we could create our own internet where we are talking to one another through hubs that allow each and every one of us to connect to and extend, right? Like, you know how an extender works. So imagine we could all extend one another. And obviously there are a lot of fundamental issues to that. We don't have to get into the technicalities right now, but that's maybe a very high level way of thinking about what a peer-to-peer web could look like from a more fundamental level, or I should say the internet. Now, what blockchains are more at a higher level than that, right? They're at the application layer where, you know, we're building new applications that allow us to achieve that same peer-to-peer kind of relationship, while still on top of a pretty centralized internet.
Right. So I guess that's why they call it decentralized, or just really removing that third-party intervention when two entities are, you know, conducting a transaction, right?
Exactly. So for me to send you some value, or even a, you know, whatever that might be denoted in a cryptocurrency, that might be denoted in a piece of art, right? For us to exchange, why do we need an intermediary? If usually it's because that we needed someone to barter that transaction for us for reasons of trust. But what if a decentralized trust mechanism or trustless mechanism, which is what we refer to this technology as, decentralized and trustless, could facilitate that with economic primitives or crypto economic primitives, ensuring that, you know, these are all verifiably trustworthy transactions that we're engaging in.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to quickly dive into something that was really, piquing my curiosity in terms of the applications that you build or anyone else builds. Let's say with Ethereum, right? What would happen if Ethereum is no longer being used? And let's say recently there's been news about Cardano, and I don't know how serious that is, but let's say Cardano wanting to compete with Ethereum in the area that they're basically being utilized in. What is going to happen if Ethereum is no longer being used? Does that mean all of this technology or platforms that were built would no longer be valid, or are they transferable into another area like Cardano?
So yeah, I think the real funny thing about all of these conversations is that we have to remember that Ethereum is more than just Ethereum. Ethereum standardized what's known as the EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine, which really, for those kind of listening, really just allows us to write smart contracts, to write these applications in what's called the domain specific language, a DSL, called Solidity. And so Solidity looks like JavaScript, but acts differently in that, it allows us to write these smart contracts that then allow for people to deploy them onto the Ethereum network. So with things like Cardano and all of these other chains, they do have a compelling story for how they integrate with Ethereum, because there is no way to do anything without a focus on Ethereum, right? Like Ethereum is an incredibly proven, incredible developer tooling and so much, incredible network effects within the things that have been utilizing these developer tools, that it's a lot more than just one project or one thing, right? And so I think what a more likely outcome is one where, when people first look at blockchain, they start with Bitcoin, they then get to Ethereum, and then they go down even deeper into a lot of these other ones. So we work a lot on Polkadot, Filecoin. We've been working a lot on something called the Mina protocol. We interact with a whole bunch of others as well through a lot of our work. And I think what a more likely narrative will be one where Ethereum is now also seen as kind of a de facto cornerstone like Bitcoin, and these other platforms are also able to succeed, right? Like this doesn't need to be a zero-sum thing, right? We haven't really seen what the true value of blockchain technology will be in the world. And so I think a more likely scenario will be one where we start to see other stories coming and being a part of the narrative without having to take anything away from Ethereum, rather extending Ethereum, adding value to Ethereum, adding value to Bitcoin, moving value between all of these chains. I mean, that's really what we're more interested in, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't have to be a winner and a loser. We just need to all kind of understand that we don't even know where this is going yet, or we haven't even seen how much impact it can have. Because really all we've done is scratch the surface on a few different types of applications, on financial ones, on kind of royalty-based ones like NFTs, right? We're only just scratching the surface on what is possible with this technology. And so to say that we're already at a place of zero-sum competition, I think is just not very, it's what people want you to think because they want you to be completely bought into one ecosystem. But in reality, for all of us to succeed, we all need to be providing real value, and we can't be trying to, be focused too much on these competitive narratives.
Man, that makes a lot of sense. You put it really well. I mean, that hit home for me when you said it's not a zero-sum game. It's, it's a positive-sum game. And like you said, maybe there is this narrative so that you get pulled into one ecosystem or community, but we still are at the very early stages. So these types of conversations are very premature for now.
Totally. And so in our space, we like to call this tribalism, right? Like obviously there's tribalism in many parts of the world and many different aspects of the world. But in the blockchain space, we kind of call this a tribalist kind of narrative, one where some people truly do believe there is only a zero-sum kind of element to this all, a maximalist, we say, narrative, when in reality, that's mostly because you are kind of aligned financially with one of those being successful. I mean, that's really what we need to be asking, right? And so there's a lot more to it than that. And we do believe that technology-wise, there's so much going on and so much that still needs to go on. And that's really the most exciting part of this all. And that's really where the most kind of impact is going to come from.
That makes sense. So how do you like it overall? How has the experience been, leading a team, finding a company? How's that going? Your relationship with your team and all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's every day is living a dream, and being able to actualize that into real impact in other people's everyday lives. I mean, to be able to work with people who started out as friends, started out as people who were just interested in things together, and to be able to really create more value in terms of true impact for developers all around the world, and to see that every day is incredibly humbling and really becomes the mission more than anything, which is to see the ability for you to impact the world realized every single day, and the need to take that to the next level, because it becomes a duty and a responsibility above all else. And so more than anything, we're able to create things sustainably and then share them with the world. And that is the biggest gift of it all. It's to be able to create tools, create infrastructure, and to see people around us building incredible things with it, and to be able to help them achieve their dreams while realizing our dreams at the same time. And so I could, to say that I guess this is a dream is actually a lie, because I never imagined it would be, the way it is today. And that, at the beginning of all of this, for us, it was, we knew we had an idea of being technology agnostic. We knew we had an idea about the types of technologies we were interested in, but to see the level of growth our space has seen definitely was 2 or 3 years earlier than a lot of us ever imagined. And it really had to do with the world waking up to how fragile everything is around us, how fragile the financial systems are, how fragile these systems that we put all of our data into are, how fragile the decision-making processes are in terms of how we get to, make decisions in our day-to-day lives, or how others make decisions, for others in their day-to-day lives. These are the things that have really, really shaken up the world and shown them the true, impact that a trustless web, a decentralized web, can have on the world. And that is, no longer are we having to explain to people why trustlessness and decentralization is important. No longer do we have to explain why Google and Facebook do bad, right? Whereas when we started, that was definitely more of the conversation, which was like, well, why not Facebook? Well, now we have 100,000 use case examples of why not Facebook, right? And so it's just a completely different narrative in the world. And, young people are not having the world that we're being left and just accepting it as is. We are creating a better future for the future generations, without a doubt. And we will not just say yes and accept what's been given to us. And that's just been so inspiring and so exciting to see how quickly that has trickled into our space and our ecosystem.
I can sense the excitement, the motivation, and the inspiration that you have in leading this for sure. I mean, I can see it through your expressions, through the way that you explain and talk about, you know, the work that you do along with the community that you're surrounded by. So really
I
more
just
power.
feel so lucky. I just feel so privileged to be surrounded by such incredible colleagues, such incredible people, you know, such an amazing community that really does want to do so much more with the internet. And obviously there are bad actors. Obviously there are negative parts like there are of any industry, right? But I really appreciate you saying that. But really, I get to have these conversations because of the incredible work that the people I work with do every single day, and the hard work and determination they have to achieving this mission and this goal, which is definitely, you know, quite a thing to take on.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, I almost think, and this might not even really be the reason why blockchain was born in the first place, but it's almost like a response to how immature and manipulative the big organizations became with the data that we had. And it's almost like it's very natural when one entity holds so much data for them to take advantage of and incorrectly use this information to their own benefit, right? And with blockchain technology, it seems like it's almost a response or a reaction to that, where now we don't necessarily have asymmetry anymore. It's like you know what I mean. There's no more
For sure,
asymmetry of information and ownership of information. It's more
for sure.
democratized.
For sure. I mean, it's balancing that asymmetrical power dynamic that's been prevalent in the web, and it's balancing it in favor of the people,
Mm.
right? The people who are the ones who are creating all this value, are the ones who are fueling the true kind of underlying uh, economic kind of exchanges that are making these services possible, right? No longer are people you know, accepting that they should be thankful for this technology and that there isn't, you know, a better option for how they talk to each other. And I think that's really what has changed, is that when things like Facebook came out, you were just thankful to be able to talk to your friends, right? You were like, whoa, they're giving this to me for free.
Yeah.
You know, asterisks stealing your data and
Free.
making, yeah, millions of dollars on your back, now billions of dollars. And so I think no longer are we accepting that that's, you know, how it needs to be.
For sure. Now, Aidan, I have a few questions for those I'm sure who are interested in becoming more knowledgeable about this field as well, and kind of dipping their toes in. Would you have some resources, maybe books, articles, websites for people to dive a little deeper, myself included? I'm very curious.
For sure. So I would Google search ETH Hub as a really good source to learning more about Ethereum. The ethereum.org website is great to for learning more about Ethereum. I would check out Filecoin, Polkadot, Mina, and just read more about these different new ecosystems that are being built around us. But really starting with, you know, those first two websites, I think the most content out there is Ethereum focused, and that it's just been around as a blockchain the longest in terms of doing something more than just, you know, sending money from point A to point B. which is really all that was possible before. And yeah, with that, there are books like Mastering Bitcoin, Mastering Ethereum, Mastering Ethereum is available online, but you can also purchase it if you want a hardcover copy. Those are great starters as well for people. But yeah, in general, I would visit your local meetup community. Obviously, it's a little bit harder nowadays. But yeah, there's lots of local meetups that happen all over the world, and a lot of them are virtual now. And those are great sources of information, great sources of community. And yeah, check out our Medium. Our Medium does a great job of giving updates to a lot of these technologies, to explaining a lot of these technologies. We've written stuff about, the migration from ETH1 to ETH2. Yeah, I would just check out. At this point, there's so much content out there, and it's just a matter of taking the time to really take it all in.
That sounds perfect. I'll definitely be sure to put it down in the link as well for anyone who wants to check these out. But hey, Aidan, we're I think around the 40-minute mark or 35-minute mark. So I really want to thank you for your time. I can appreciate how busy you are as well. So it's really been great talking to you. I want to get you in for part 2 as well sometime to dive deeper into other questions, make use of your vast knowledge in this field.
Honestly, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for facilitating these conversations with the world, really, and making sure that people have access to the information they need to understand the impact of not just this technology, but technology and things in general that's coming. So I really appreciate you making this happen and reaching out. And I really do look forward to following up soon with you for part 2 or whatever you're looking to talk about. So
Yeah,
thank you
same
for
here.
making this platform able to disseminate this information to so many different people.
Of course. No, the pleasure is mine, Aidan. Thank you very much, and talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.